My name is Annette, and at 72 years old, I built a successful luxury real estate business that afforded me my beautiful Beacon Hill mansion in Boston. After a minor health scare, my son Patrick and his wife Victoria suggested I move in with them for recovery. Little did I know that Victoria would start treating me like I was senile, even locking me in the guest wing whenever important visitors came. She paraded around my home as if it were hers, not realizing one crucial detail. I still owned everything, and the proof was hidden in the very room where she confined me. Before I tell you how I reclaimed my dignity and my home, let me know where you're watching from, and drop a like if you believe respect should be earned, not demanded, regardless of someone's age. The mansion on Beacon Hill wasn't just any property to me. Richard and I purchased it 45 years ago, when our real estate business was just taking off. Built in 1887, this red brick federal-style home with its 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, and spectacular view of Boston Common became the crown jewel of our portfolio and the heart of our family life. Richard had the vision, and I had the business acumen. Together, we built Winslow Properties into one of Boston's most prestigious real estate firms, specializing in historic homes. While other companies chased modern developments, we dedicated ourselves to preserving the city's architectural heritage. Our reputation for thoughtful restorations of historic properties made us the go-to agency for Boston's elite looking to own a piece of history. 5 years ago, Richard lost his battle with pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came suddenly, and within 6 months, he was gone. After 47 years of marriage, I found myself alone in our mansion, surrounded by memories and the business we had built together. Despite my grief, I kept Winslow Properties running successfully. I may have been in my late 60s, but my mind remained sharp as ever. Our clients trusted me, and our staff respected my experience and judgment. 8 months ago, I experienced what doctors called a mild stroke while attending a charity function. Nothing dramatic, just a moment of dizziness and slurred speech that sent me to Massachusetts General Hospital for 2 nights of observation. The doctors assured me there was no permanent damage, but they recommended reducing stress and regular health checkups. That's when Patrick and Victoria swooped in with their suggestion that I move in with them temporarily while I recovered. Patrick, our only child, had always been thoughtful, but easily influenced by stronger personalities. As an investment banker, he had done well for himself, but never quite matched the success Richard and I had achieved. I was touched by his concern and thought the arrangement might give us a chance to grow closer after years of seeing each other, mainly during holidays and occasional Sunday dinners. "Mom, it makes no sense for you to be rattling around in this big house alone after your health scare," Patrick had insisted. "Just stay with us for a while until you're back to 100%. What I didn't fully consider was that with us meant Victoria too. My daughter-in-law had been a moderately successful model in her younger days before marrying Patrick 12 years ago. At 45, she maintained her slim figure and striking features. But what defined Victoria was her relentless social climbing. Every conversation somehow included mentions of the important people she knew or exclusive events she'd attended. She was pleasant enough to me over the years, if somewhat distant, and I appreciated that she made Patrick happy. When I agreed to their suggestion, I made one thing clear. The mansion would remain legally mine, though Patrick and Victoria could live there during my recovery. My attorney Eleanor insisted on this arrangement, and I'm eternally grateful for her foresight now. Just sign the occupancy agreement, not the deed, Eleanor had advised. There's no need to transfer ownership, just because you're taking some time to recover. Victoria had been all smiles when I moved into the East Wing master suite, making a show of helping arrange my belongings and assuring me I would feel right at home. But there were small slips in those early weeks, comments that revealed what she really thought of the arrangement. This wallpaper is so dated, but I suppose we shouldn't change things too quickly, she'd say, examining the hand-painted chinoiserie, wall covering Richard and I had commissioned from an artist in Paris. Or, don't worry about the dinner party planning, Annette. At your age, you should focus on resting. I'll handle everything from now on. These comments seemed innocent enough at first, but they were just the beginning of a calculated campaign to erase me from my own home. The first real disappointment came about a month after I moved in, when I discovered Victoria had dismissed Margaret, my housekeeper of 20 years, without consulting me. I came downstairs one morning to find a young woman I'd never seen before dusting the Chippendale desk in the foyer. When I asked for Margaret, the woman looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Victoria said Margaret's services were no longer required, she explained nervously. I'm Dana. I started yesterday. When I confronted Victoria, she was unapologetic. Margaret was set in her ways, Annette. She wasn't adapting to the new household arrangement. Dana comes highly recommended by my friend Bianca Harrington. The Harrington name was dropped deliberately. Victoria knew they were prominent in Boston society. Still, I was shocked by her audacity. Victoria Margaret has been with me for 2 decades. She knows this house and my preferences. You should have discussed this with me first. Oh, Annette, she replied with a patronizing smile. You don't need to worry about household staffing anymore. That's why Patrick and I are here, to take these burdens off your shoulders. Within weeks, all my longtime staff had been replaced with Victoria's choices. People who saw her as their employer and treated me with a strange mix of pity and caution. They were unfailingly polite, but followed Victoria's instructions exclusively. The next phase of Victoria's takeover involved redecorating. My antique Persian rugs disappeared, replaced by modern area rugs in cold, neutral tones. The warm gold walls in the living room were painted stark white. Family photos that had lined the hallway vanished, substituted with abstract art pieces that meant nothing to me. When I discovered my late mother's silver tea service had been moved to the attic, I complained to Patrick. He seemed genuinely concerned, but ultimately ineffective. I'll talk to Victoria, he promised. But you know she has an eye for design, Mom. Maybe some updates aren't such a bad idea. This place has looked the same for decades. His words stung. This wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about systematically removing traces of my life from my own home. The first instance of being hidden away came about 2 months into my stay. Victoria was hosting a dinner party for some of Patrick's colleagues. As I came downstairs in my evening outfit, she intercepted me in the hallway. "Annette, I've had a lovely dinner tray prepared for you in your suite," she said with artificial brightness. "These work functions are so tedious, and I thought you'd be more comfortable eating in peace." "I'm perfectly capable of joining a dinner party, Victoria," I replied firmly. "I've hosted hundreds in this very dining room." Her smile tightened. "Of course you have, but Patrick mentioned you seemed tired earlier. We're just concerned about your health." When Patrick appeared and sided with Victoria, I reluctantly retreated to my suite, feeling both hurt and confused. Later that evening, I decided to come down for coffee and dessert, thinking that would be a reasonable compromise. As I approached the dining room, I overheard Victoria speaking to the guests. "We're so grateful to have Annette with us, where we can keep an eye on her," she was saying in a hushed, concerned tone. "Since her episode, she gets confused sometimes. The doctors say it's normal at her age, but she needs constant supervision." I froze in the hallway, unable to believe what I was hearing. Patrick said nothing to contradict this blatant lie about my mental state. I returned to my room, deeply wounded by this betrayal. The next day, I called Eleanor to share my concerns. "This sounds like the beginning of elder abuse, Annette," my friend warned. "Isolation and misrepresentation are classic tactics. Start documenting everything, dates, times, exactly what was said and done." I was reluctant to believe Patrick would allow such treatment of his mother, but I followed Eleanor's advice anyway, keeping a detailed journal hidden in my nightstand. "He's my son, Eleanor," I said. "Surely he wouldn't let things go too far." How wrong I was. Victoria's campaign escalated over the following months. She began controlling my medication schedule, insisting I couldn't be trusted to take pills on time, despite the fact I'd been managing my own healthcare for decades. A small weekly pill organizer appeared on my nightstand, filled by Victoria herself, who suddenly claimed extensive knowledge of geriatric care. My aunt had similar issues with medication compliance, she would say when I objected. "It's nothing to be embarrassed about." Access to my study, where I kept important business papers, became increasingly restricted. Files mysteriously migrated to Patrick's home office, which was always conveniently locked when I wanted to review them. "Don't worry about those old documents," Victoria would say. "Patrick's handling everything now. You deserve to rest." My phone calls were subtly monitored, with Victoria often hovering nearby or picking up another extension claiming she accidentally picked up the phone. Friends who tried to visit found themselves politely but firmly turned away. "Annette is resting today," they would be told. "The doctor recommends limiting visitors to prevent overexertion." One particularly upsetting incident involved my reading glasses. I always kept them on my bedside table, but one morning they were gone. I searched everywhere before asking Victoria if she had seen them. "No, but you're always misplacing things lately," she replied with exaggerated patience. "This is exactly why Patrick and I worry about you living alone." The glasses mysteriously reappeared 3 days later in the kitchen drawer, a place I would never have put them. But by then, Victoria had used my inability to read documents as evidence of my confusion during a visit from our family doctor. "She couldn't even find her glasses for days, doctor. We're really concerned about her cognition. Patrick, meanwhile, seemed to be working longer hours, often leaving before I woke and returning after dinner. Our opportunities for private conversations dwindled to almost nothing. When I did manage to speak with him alone, he seemed distracted and dismissive of my concerns. "Victoria is doing her best, Mom," he would say. "Running this big house isn't easy, and she's only looking out for your welfare." Victoria began suggesting certain areas of the house were too dangerous for me. The stairs to the third floor might cause a fall. The kitchen had too many hazards. The garden paths were too uneven. Gradually, my world shrank to just a few rooms in the massive house I had owned for 4 decades. The social events Victoria hosted grew more elaborate and frequent. I caught glimpses of these gatherings from my restricted areas, watching as she positioned herself as the lady of the mansion, giving tours of rooms she had no hand in creating, and showing off family heirlooms as if they were her own. This Tiffany lamp has been in our family for generations. I overheard her tell a group of admiring guests, referring to a piece Richard and I had purchased at auction in 1992. The final straw came when I overheard Victoria speaking to a society friend in the garden below my window. "We're planning to renovate the entire estate once Annette transitions to a care facility," she was saying confidently. "The East Wing will make a fabulous spa and home gym, don't you think?" The realization hit me like a physical blow. Victoria wasn't just controlling me. She was systematically erasing me planning for a future where I no longer existed in the home I had built with Richard. Even worse, she was manipulating my son to help her do it. That night, I made a secret call to Eleanor from the old landline in the linen closet. The one Victoria didn't know still worked. "It's worse than we thought," I whispered. "I need to gather evidence and prepare for a confrontation." "Document everything," Eleanor advised. "And remember the safe room we set up after Richard died. Make sure you can access it if needed." The pain of seeing my son manipulated cut deeper than any of Victoria's schemes. But my determination to fight back grew stronger with each new indignity. This was my home, my legacy, and I refused to be written out of my own life story. The breaking point came 6 months into my stay on a crisp October evening. Victoria had been planning for weeks what she called the Autumn Arts Benefit, a charity gala to be held at the mansion. The guest list included the mayor, several city council members, prominent business leaders, and the entire social elite of Boston. I had expressed interest in attending, only to be gently but firmly shut down by Victoria. "The noise and excitement might be too much for you, Annette," she said with practiced concern. "We've arranged for a lovely dinner in your suite, and Lucia will keep you company." Lucia was the newest staff addition, a young woman whose primary qualification seemed to be complete loyalty to Victoria. On the evening of the gala, she appeared at my door with a tray of bland food and a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Victoria says you should rest tonight," she informed me. "The house will be very busy with important people." After she left, I tried to open my door, only to discover it had been locked from the outside. Shocked, I tried calling Patrick's cell phone, but my room phone had been disconnected. I was literally imprisoned in my own home while a party took place downstairs. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I felt anger rising to replace the hurt and confusion of recent months. This was no longer about misunderstandings or different perspectives. This was calculated cruelty and illegal confinement. Then I remembered something that Victoria didn't know. The guest suite, where I was now locked, had been Richard's private study before our renovation 10 years ago. Behind the Monet reproduction on the east wall was a small wall safe we had installed to keep important documents secure during the construction. With trembling hands, I moved the painting aside and stared at the safe I hadn't opened in years. Would the combination still work? I tried the familiar numbers, our wedding anniversary, and felt a rush of triumph when the door swung open. Inside lay exactly what I needed: a duplicate deed to the mansion with my sole ownership, clearly stated, our company ownership papers, Richard's will naming me his sole beneficiary, and power of attorney documents that had never been transferred to Patrick, despite Victoria's claims to various service providers. Another discovery brought a grim smile to my face. The guest suite connected to an old service passage that led to the butler's pantry off the main kitchen, a remnant of the house's Victorian origins. Victoria, for all her invasive redecorating, had never discovered this architectural feature. Moving silently through the dimly lit passage, I emerged near the kitchen, where catering staff were too busy to notice me. From there, I could hear Victoria's voice in the main hall, leading what sounded like a house tour. The original moldings were my special project, she was saying to an admiring group. I worked with artisans to restore every detail to its former glory. I moved closer, staying hidden behind a large floral arrangement, and saw Victoria gesturing to the crown, molding Richard, and I had meticulously restored 20 years earlier. And, of course, we plan to continue our family's tradition of philanthropy, she continued smoothly. The Winslow name has always stood for community support. A silver-haired woman in an elegant black dress asked, "Will your mother-in-law be joining us tonight?" I've known Annette for years through the Preservation Society. Victoria's face showed the briefest flicker of annoyance before settling into practiced concern. "Poor thing, dementia is so cruel," she said in a hushed, sympathetic tone. "We'll be moving her to a specialized facility next month. The doctors feel it would be best for everyone." I scanned the group for Patrick and found him standing slightly apart, a flute of champagne in his hand, his expression uncomfortable but silent. He was allowing this lie, this complete fabrication about my mental state and future, without a single word of contradiction. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. This wasn't just Victoria controlling access to my home or redecorating to suit her taste. This was a systematic campaign to erase me entirely. From my home, from my business, and ultimately from my son's life. She wanted the mansion, the Winslow name and prestige, but not the woman who had built it all. I slipped back to my locked room through the service passage, my mind whirling with anger and determination. Victoria thought she had won, but she had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated me. I wasn't confused. I wasn't senile. And I certainly wasn't going to be shipped off to a facility while she took over my life's work. The documents in my hands were more than papers. They were my weapons in the battle that was about to begin. Back in my locked room, I formulated a plan. First, I needed allies and evidence. Using an emergency cell phone I had hidden inside a hollowed-out book, a precaution Eleanor had insisted on, I sent her a text. Locked in room, need help. Come tomorrow, 10 a.m. The next morning, Lucia unlocked my door with a breakfast, looking surprised to find me fully dressed and calm. "Did you sleep well, Mrs. Annette?" she asked with false cheerfulness. "Wonderfully," I replied with a smile. "I'd like to sit in the garden today, if that's not too much trouble." Looking uncertain, but finding no reason to refuse, Lucia agreed. This gave me the opportunity to be at the side entrance when Eleanor arrived promptly at 10, accompanied by a notary, a security consultant, and a geriatric physician I recognized from Massachusetts General. "Annette, thank goodness." Eleanor embraced me. "We have work to do." Over the next few hours, we documented everything. The physician conducted a thorough cognitive assessment, officially noting that I showed no signs of dementia or confusion. The security consultant photographed the locked door, disconnected phone, and evidence of my restricted movements throughout the house. The notary verified all my legal documents, confirming I remained the sole owner of both the property and Winslow Enterprises. Victoria has been presenting herself as the owner to contractors and service providers, Eleanor explained, showing me copies of invoices. But she's been careful not to actually commit fraud by signing your name. Instead, she's created a perception that she's acting on your behalf. We were finishing our documentation when Patrick arrived home unexpectedly for lunch, finding us gathered in my suite. His face registered shock, then anger. "Mom, what's going on? Who are these people?" "Legal advisors," I said calmly. "We're reviewing some important documents." Victoria appeared behind him, her face hardening when she saw Eleanor, whom she'd met at previous family functions. "Annette, you know, you're not supposed to have visitors without discussing it first," she said with forced pleasantness. "Your doctors recommended limiting stressful interactions." "What doctors?" the geriatric physician asked, standing. "I've been Dr. Winslow's physician for 15 years, and I have made no such recommendation." Victoria's smile faltered slightly. "Patrick, your mother is clearly confused again, inviting strangers into our home." "This is my home, Victoria," I corrected her quietly. "And these are not strangers. This is my attorney, my doctor, and other professionals helping me sort out some concerning situations." Patrick looked between us, confusion evident on his face. "Mom, what are you talking about? Victoria has only been trying to help you recover." "By locking me in my room during last night's gala, by telling guests I have dementia and will be moved to a facility next month," I asked. Victoria's face paled slightly before she recovered. "You're imagining things again, Annette. This is exactly why we're worried." Eleanor stepped forward. "Mr. Winslow, we have documented numerous incidents of elder abuse and isolation over the past several months. As your mother's attorney, I strongly advise you to hear her concerns." Patrick looked stunned, while Victoria quickly took control. "This is ridiculous. Patrick, they're manipulating your mother's confusion to create problems. I think these people should leave immediately." Surprisingly, Patrick stood his ground. No, I want to hear what Mom and her attorney have to say. Victoria stormed out, and I felt a small glimmer of hope that my son might finally see the truth. However, I didn't reveal everything at that moment. A more public reckoning would be necessary to fully expose Victoria's manipulations, and I knew exactly when that should happen. After my visitors left, I learned from Margaret, my former housekeeper, whom Eleanor had contacted, that Victoria was planning another major event. A fundraiser for the hospital board position she desperately coveted. This would be my opportunity to reclaim my home and dignity in the most public way possible. Over the next week, while pretending to accept my restricted role, I worked with Eleanor to prepare everything: security measures, legal documentation, and witness statements from former staff members who had observed Victoria's treatment of me. The emotional weight of potentially severing my relationship with Patrick hung heavy on my heart. Would he finally see the truth? Or would Victoria's influence prove too strong? Regardless of the outcome, I was determined to stand up for myself. I had built a life and business through determination and intelligence. I wouldn't be erased from my own story. The night of Victoria's fundraiser arrived with perfect autumn weather. From my window, I watched luxury cars pull up to the circular driveway, disgorging Boston's elite in evening wear. The mansion blazed with lights, flowers adorned every surface, and staff in formal attire circulated with champagne. I dressed carefully in a navy blue Chanel suit Richard had given me for our last anniversary, applied my makeup with precision, and waited for Eleanor's text. At precisely 8:30, when the event would be in full swing, I received it, all in position. Making my way through the service passage one final time, I emerged near the grand staircase, just as Victoria was beginning her formal address to the assembled crowd. Standing at the bottom of the stairs, microphone in hand, she was radiant in a red designer gown, the picture of confident sophistication. "Thank you all for coming to support Boston General's new cardiac wing," she was saying. "As many of you know, the Winslow family has a long tradition of philanthropy in this community. My husband Patrick and I are honored to continue that legacy in this beautiful, historic home that we've lovingly restored." Taking a deep breath, I stepped into view at the top of the staircase. A hushed murmur spread through the crowd as heads turned upward. Victoria froze mid-sentence, her face registering shock before quickly recovering. "And here's my mother-in-law," she exclaimed with forced brightness. "Annette, dear, we didn't expect you to join us. Let me help you back to your room. You must be confused about the time." "I'm not confused about anything, Victoria," I replied, my voice carrying clearly as I descended the stairs. Eleanor appeared at my side along with the security consultant and notary from our previous meeting. Victoria's eyes darted nervously between them and the crowd of prominent Bostonians watching with interest. "Annette sometimes gets disoriented," she explained to the guests with an embarrassed smile. "Patrick, could you please help your mother?" Patrick stepped forward, looking uncertain. "Mom, what's going on?" I addressed not him, but the entire gathering. "I'm Annette Winslow, and contrary to what many of you have been told, I am of sound mind and the sole owner of this mansion and Winslow properties." Eleanor handed me the folder of documents, which I held up for all to see. These are the legal deed and ownership papers that confirm this fact. For the past 6 months, I have been systematically isolated, misrepresented, and at times, literally locked in my room by my daughter-in-law, who has been presenting herself as the owner of my property and the controller of my affairs. The crowd's murmuring grew louder as Victoria's face flushed with anger. "This is preposterous. Patrick, do something." But Patrick stood frozen, looking from me to Victoria with dawning horror. I continued calmly. "Last night, during the charity gala held here, I was locked in the guest wing by my daughter-in-law's staff. My phone was disconnected, and Victoria told several of you that I suffered from dementia and would be moved to a facility next month." I looked directly at the silver-haired woman who had asked about me. "Isn't that right, Judith?" Judith Cavendish, a prominent hospital board member, nodded slowly. "That is what we were told." "Yes." Victoria's composure cracked. "You're twisting things. Patrick and I have only been trying to care for you after your stroke. A minor episode from which I fully recovered." I corrected her, nodding to my physician, who had just arrived and joined us on the stairs. "Dr. Levinson can confirm my cognitive health, as can these legal documents showing I was deemed fully competent just this week." From the back of the room, a familiar figure stepped forward. Margaret, my former housekeeper. "Mrs. Winslow has always been sharp as a tack," she stated firmly. "I worked for her for 20 years until Mrs. Victoria dismissed me without cause and replaced all the staff with her own people." Victoria looked around desperately as her carefully constructed facade crumbled. "This is all a misunderstanding, Patrick, tell them." All eyes turned to my son, whose face had gone pale with realization. For the first time, he was seeing the full extent of his wife's manipulations. "Mom," he said quietly, "is this true? Did Victoria lock you in your room?" "Yes," I replied simply, "and told everyone I was mentally incompetent and planned to move me to a facility without my consent." The hospital board president stepped forward, his expression grave. "Mrs. Winslow, Victoria, I think we need to reconsider your candidacy for the board position in light of these concerning allegations." Victoria's carefully cultivated poise finally shattered completely. "You ungrateful old woman," she shouted at me, her voice echoing through the shocked silence. "We took you in. We've been waiting for you to either die or become incompetent enough to sign over the house. Do you know how hard I've worked to build our social position? Everything was perfect until you ruined it." Her unfiltered words confirmed every accusation more effectively than any evidence could have. Guests began edging toward the exits, murmuring in discomfort and disapproval. I maintained my composure, speaking clearly to the remaining crowd. "I apologize for this unfortunate scene, but I felt it necessary to reclaim my identity and property. Victoria and Patrick will be vacating the premises, and I will be resuming full control of my home and business." As security discreetly escorted the last uncomfortable guest out, Victoria stood in the center of the empty reception hall. Her carefully constructed world collapsed around her. Patrick looked shell-shocked, moving away from her, to stand alone by the fireplace. I had reclaimed my house, but at what cost to my family, only time would tell. In the days following the fundraiser, the mansion felt eerily quiet. Victoria moved out immediately, taking only her personal belongings and leaving, without a word, to me. Patrick came to my study the next morning, his eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. "I had no idea how bad it had gotten, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "I knew Victoria was controlling, but I never thought she'd go so far. I should have protected you." His remorse seemed genuine, but the betrayal cut deep. "You chose not to see what was happening, Patrick. You heard her call me confused and useless, and you said nothing." "I know," he admitted, tears forming. "I've spent all night thinking about how I failed you. Victoria always had an explanation for everything. Your confusion, your safety, how managing the house was too much for you. I wanted to believe we were helping you, and it was easier to believe her than to stand up for me," I said quietly. He nodded miserably. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I'm deeply sorry and I'm filing for divorce. Victoria's behavior is unforgivable, and so is my failure to stop it. I appreciate your apology, Patrick, but reconciliation will take time," I told him. "If you're serious about making amends, I suggest therapy to understand why you allowed Victoria to manipulate you and mistreat me. In the meantime, I think you should find your own place." Over the following months, I reclaimed my home and life piece by piece. The mansion underwent another renovation this time, restoring the warmth and character Victoria had stripped away. Family photos returned to their places of honor. The Persian rugs came back from storage. Margaret and several other loyal staff members returned to work, their familiar faces a comfort in the aftermath of betrayal. I resumed active management of Winslow properties, much to the relief of our long-term clients, who had been confused by Victoria's attempts to insert herself into business dealings. Eleanor helped establish clear legal protections against future manipulation, including a healthcare proxy naming her, not Patrick, as my decision-maker, should I ever become incapacitated. Most meaningful to me was establishing the Winslow Elder Advocacy Program through my foundation. Using my own experience as inspiration, we began providing legal and personal support to older adults facing exploitation or abuse. The work became a passion that gave purpose to the pain I had endured. Patrick kept his word about seeking therapy, renting an apartment downtown, and meeting with a counselor twice weekly. Our relationship began a slow healing process, starting with short visits and gradually building to regular dinners, where we worked through difficult conversations about trust, independence, and respect. 6 months after the confrontation, I received papers indicating Patrick and Victoria's divorce was finalized. While I took no pleasure in the dissolution of their marriage, I was relieved that Victoria's toxic influence had been removed from both our lives. Patrick emerged from the relationship more thoughtful and independent than I had seen him in years. One evening, as we shared dinner in the newly restored dining room, Patrick raised his glass in a toast. "To you, Mom," he said sincerely. "You taught me more about strength and dignity in the past year than I learned in all my previous life. Thank you for giving me the chance to become a better son." Looking back now, I realized that standing up for myself was the greatest gift I could have given to both of us. Patrick needed to see that love doesn't mean enabling poor treatment. And I needed to remember that my age doesn't diminish my right to respect and autonomy. I've learned that genuine relationships are built on mutual respect, not social climbing or appearances. True family lifts you up rather than diminishing you. And forgiveness, while healing, doesn't require forgetting or allowing yourself to be mistreated again. Most importantly, I've learned that it's never too late to reclaim your voice and your power. Whether you're 22 or 72, you deserve to be treated with dignity. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who was diminishing your worth or gaslighting you into doubting yourself? Share your story in the comments below. If my experience resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. And if you know someone who might need encouragement to recognize their own value, share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, respect isn't determined by age, but by character and courage.